Hello. How are you? Today we are going to tell you about what would happen if humans disappeared from one second to the next without a trace. Without further ado, let's get started. First of all, we should say that our factories, our garbage in water, in space, and carbon dioxide pollute our planet. But if we disappear, would our trail be erased? One to 15 seconds. At this time, millions of vehicles on the roads would continue straight until they were lost in the field. Meanwhile, in cities, vehicles would hit something, causing catastrophes and explosions and crashes. 1 to 30 minutes. In these minutes, at airports, on the runways, planes descend at 160 kilometers per hour, but if there are no pilots to reduce the plane's speed, those planes would collide with a structure, causing an explosion that causes a fire. The rest of all the planes navigate on autopilot, but when they run out of fuel they will fall to the ground. One to 6 hours. Right now, all the factories and nuclear plants around the world are shutting down because there's no one to take care that these factories and nuclear plants need more energy. That causes the lights to go out all over the world until everything is dark. Cities like Las Vegas, New York and Tokyo, those cities would only be something black and dark at night. Wind power is also going to stop because there's going to be no one to take care of the power and motors, and the solar panels are finally going to be covered in dust. Furthermore, when humans disappeared, millions of domestic animals were trapped in their homes, and if they are hungry they must flee their homes, or else they'll die. Small breed dogs may not exist for long in a world without humans, so after 2 days, dogs on the street would be so hungry that small breed dogs would be a food for dogs of large breed. So a few weeks later, those little dogs will completely cease to exist. Two to 4 days. Two or 3 days after the disappearance of humans, underground tunnels such as the New York Tunnel would be flooded due to the lack of current that makes the water pumps work. There are more or less than 700 of those water pumps that stopped working forever. In zoos, there's no current, so the electric fences do not work, so the elephants are strong and can break those fences and escape. Many animals will escape from the zoo and can return to the natural habitat. Camels are very prepared for a world without humans, because camels eat morsels of whatever plant they find and decide what is dangerous and what is nutritious. However, the animals on the farms are not so lucky, and billions of those animals will die because the wooden fences are hooked to the ground, but the electric fences are hooked to the walls. And hunger and thirst are also the cause of that. Seven to 10 days. A week after the humans disappeared, the cooling pools keep nuclear waste cold. But when the current stops bringing cold water, the temperature begins to rise. This is going to cause a fire that will cause a huge radioactive rain, and its effects are going to be 500 worse than the effects of Hiroshima. 10 days after the disappearance of humans, an explosion arises, and without humans, this repeats over and over again, polluting half the planet Earth. All of this is going to be worse than the Chernobyl case. And furthermore, the chlorophyll that makes the trees green becomes contaminated, and the trees turn red. If we showed up again, radiation would have caused cancer in millions of people. Since radiation contaminated a large part of the planet, that makes it an invisible poison which is dangerous. In urban areas, pollution doesn't affect food, and for that it is a matter of going to the market. The problem is that the food is not in good condition, since 10 days without refrigeration and without safety causes the food to rot. 3 months. 3 months after our disappearance, all the radiation from the explosions falls to the ground, healing the planet. The air is gradually improving due to the lack of carbon dioxide from nuclear plants and factories around the world. The planet is clean. The temperature drops a bit due to the sudden stop of global warming. "6 months. At this time, the rats and mice have already wiped out all the products from the markets and houses. People say that roaches could survive the winter without us, but roaches appear when there is heating. So if they want to survive, they must head to areas where it is hot. At this point, cracks begin to be seen in the streets, because these are the first signs that nature is once again dominating the planet. One year. The wind blew dirt and seeds into the cracks in the streets that formed 6 months earlier. The seeds germinated and make moss grow on the streets, making the streets something green and black. This causes the cracks to get bigger, since the more moss there is, the less space there will be, so the moss takes ground. As humans disappeared a year ago, animals begin to notice our absence. So animals begin to get into small towns and large cities. As happened a year after our disappearance, cities are deteriorating and are more unprotected, and cities are more prone to fires. "5 years. After 5 years without humans, the moss turned to grass, causing all the streets of the world to disappear, being crushed by a green savanna. The oxygen improves little by little, since any plant breathes in carbon dioxide and expels oxygen. "10 to 15 years. After these years, soccer fields, amusement parks, and Central Park of New York would look more like a forest. Many seeds germinated in the grasses and crevices in those areas. In another 15 years, the satellites that orbit planet Earth will disappear, because those satellites were not used for a long time, and besides, most of it is garbage. "20 to 25 years. In Chernobyl, in the ruins of Pripyat, in 20 years many more animals begin to get there. And in 25 years, some areas of snow that were melted by global warming are filled with a lot of white and thick milk. That is, snow. Lagoons are also formed in Mexico, and Amsterdam and London are completely flooded since the generators that make the water not rise stopped a long time ago. "30 to 40 years. After 30 years, the space debris that orbits the Earth finally falls, because every 11 years, there's a powerful solar eruption, and that makes the atmosphere expand, causing gravity to start attracting garbage and satellites that orbit our planet. And 40 years later, all the barns and houses in the country are just rotten wood due to corrosion. Trees at this time, after 4 decades, begin to grow in the living rooms of concrete houses, and also rain can enter. Also, in some homes and in many buildings, the frames that hold the windows rust, causing the glass to fall. Later, without windows, in the abandoned offices, the birds and other animals settle there. "50 to 75 years. Any lightning that strikes, any fire, any small spark that comes from a dangerous place could generate a very big fire, since the lightning rods do not work because they're oxidized, and the rays cannot strike. After 50 years of human disappearance, bridges like the Golden Gate in San Francisco, Brooklyn and New York suffer from corrosion, and the wind makes them move the bridges, because the bridges are very rusty and the paint is falling. And 75 years after our disappearance, there are more than 5 billion cars in the world. But after 75 years, cars are just going to be eroding metal. The tires are obviously flat, but for the tires to disintegrate, a few thousand more years must pass. "100 years. The Brooklyn Bridge in New York finally falls into the water, and the Golden Gate of San Francisco too, since the bridges do not resist corrosion anymore, so a century without us, those bridges would only be pieces underwater. At this point, the animals that are in danger of extinction will have multiplied by 20. "200 years. Empire State Building, One World Tower, Eiffel Tower, Willis Tower, Space Needle, Chrysler, 432 Park and Burj Khalifa, those buildings would fall after 2 centuries without us due to corrosion and wear on the paint. Iron bars are the ones that make the most of keeping buildings standing, but without us the bars will rust and triple to size. "500 years. At this time only the small structures will remain, made with concrete that will disappear in about 100 more years. "1,000 years. At this point only very, very small structures made of mass concrete will remain in some deserts and in some jungles. "10,000 years. Signs that we once were would be Mount Rushmore, the Egyptian pyramids and the Sphinx, the Chinese Wall and medieval castles. "35,000 years. All lead residues and fuel expelled into the air no longer pose a threat to planet Earth, and there are few contaminations in the water, but for the contaminations to disintegrate, 75,000 more years must pass. "100,000 years. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could return to the existing values of the industrial era, when factories and nuclear plants began to emerge in the world. "250,000 years. Finally, on planet Earth, radiation and plutonium no longer exist, and the air is the same as before, when we did not exist. "50 million years. After 50 million years, only your garbage will remain, because most of it is made of plastic, and no microscopic living thing can digest it. It will continue until they are able to do so. "3 billion years. There's no trace of humans. The Earth was completely healed. There's not a trace of our existence. If other beings like us returned to inhabit the Earth, they would never have noticed that we were here. The Earth is already completely healed. And what do you think? The Earth can go on without us, but we cannot live without the Earth." This was all for today in Kikiximo team. Kindex Maximo says goodbye and see you later.